My name is Anya, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought I'd be standing in a courtroom watching my own mother being served a restraining order, but here we are. The spare key I'd given her for emergencies had become her weapon of choice in a war I didn't even know we were fighting. As the judge's gavel came down sealing her fate, I couldn't help but think back to that Tuesday afternoon when I came home to find my apartment ransacked and my life turned upside down. Before we dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you dealing with difficult family boundaries too? Please hit that like button if you can relate. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, what happened next will leave you speechless. Let's talk about how a simple spare key nearly destroyed my entire life. Living in Denver as a marketing director for a tech startup, I thought I'd finally made it. After years of climbing the corporate ladder, I'd just received a promotion that came with a corner office and a salary that would make most people my age jealous. But success has a way of bringing out the worst in people, especially in my mother, Dorothy. Growing up, nothing I did was ever good enough for her. Straight A's in school meant I should have gotten A+. When I graduated college summa cum laude, she asked why I wasn't valedictorian. Every achievement came with a backhanded compliment, every milestone with a reminder that I could have done better. I spent my entire childhood chasing her approval like a dog chasing its tail, never quite catching it. The promotion should have been a celebration, but when I called to share the news, her response was predictable. Marketing director. Well, I suppose that's nice for now. Your cousin Linda just made partner at her law firm, you know. Maybe you should consider going back to school. That familiar sting of disappointment washed over me, but I'd grown used to swallowing it down with a practiced smile. Dorothy had always been what she called involved in my life. Others might use words like invasive or controlling, but she preferred to frame her behavior as maternal concern. She had this uncanny ability to show up at my apartment unannounced, always with some excuse about being in the neighborhood or wanting to drop off food I didn't ask for. Each visit came with the inspection of my living space and a running commentary on everything from my furniture placement to my choice of dish soap. The spare key situation started innocently enough. 3 months before everything exploded, she'd cornered me with one of her signature guilt trips. What if I have a heart attack and need to get to your medication? What if there's a fire and I need to save your photo albums? What kind of daughter doesn't trust her own mother with a key? She had this way of making reasonable boundaries sound like personal attacks, and I was too exhausted from a particularly rough week at work to fight it. I handed over the spare key thinking it would collect dust in her purse. How wrong I was. That's when Cedric entered the picture. We'd met at a tech conference where he was presenting on cybersecurity innovations. He was brilliant, kind, and most importantly, he saw through my mother's manipulation from day one. As a software engineer, he approached problems logically, and he couldn't understand why I kept bending to her will. "She's programming you like bad code," he'd say, trying to make me laugh while gently pointing out the dysfunction I'd normalized. Dorothy's reaction to Cedric was swift and merciless. The first time they met, she spent the entire dinner interrogating him about his salary, his family background, and his intentions with me. When he politely deflected her more invasive questions, she later told me he was hiding something. According to her, he wasn't tall enough, successful enough, or good enough for her daughter. The fact that he made me happy seemed irrelevant to her evaluation. The first incident with the key happened just 2 weeks after I'd given it to her. I came home from work to find my mail sorted on my kitchen counter, bills opened and arranged by due date. When I called to ask about it, she chirped, "Oh, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd help you stay organized." "You're welcome." When I expressed discomfort about her going through my mail, she launched into a tirade about ungrateful children and how she was just trying to help. The second incident was worse. I returned from a weekend trip with Cedric to find my entire apartment cleaned. By cleaned, I mean she'd thrown away important documents I'd left on my desk, including contracts I needed for work and tax forms I hadn't yet filed. She'd rearranged my closet, tossed out clothes she deemed inappropriate for a woman your age, and left passive-aggressive notes on my refrigerator about my eating habits. Sweetie, all this takeout will make you fat. Men don't marry fat women. Love, Mom. The third strike came when I found her sitting on my couch reading through my work laptop. She'd figured out my password because, stupidly, I'd written it on a sticky note hidden under my keyboard. She was scrolling through my emails when I walked in, and her response to my shock was a casual, "Just making sure you're not sending inappropriate messages to that Cedric. You can't be too careful these days." My anxiety skyrocketed. I started having trouble sleeping, constantly wondering when I'd come home to find her there. I installed a doorbell camera without telling her, partly for security, but mostly for my own sanity. I needed to know when she was entering my space. The footage I collected over the next few weeks would later become crucial evidence, but at the time I was just trying to track the invasion of my privacy. Every time I tried to establish boundaries, she'd weaponize her emotions. Tears would flow, accusations would fly. "I carried you for 9 months. I sacrificed everything for you. This is how you repay me, by treating me like a criminal." She'd call my aunts, my grandmother, anyone who would listen, spinning tales of her ungrateful daughter who was being brainwashed by that man. The family pressure was intense. My phone would blow up with messages telling me to be nice to your mother and reminding me that she won't be around forever. That Tuesday afternoon, I left work early with a migraine that felt like someone was driving nails into my skull. The stress of managing my mother's intrusions while trying to excel at my new position was taking a physical toll. My doctor had already increased my anxiety medication twice, and I was considering therapy, though I knew Dorothy would see that as a personal attack on her parenting. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the visitor's spot. Something in my gut twisted a premonition of disaster. I climbed the stairs to my second-floor unit, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached my door, I could hear voices inside. My mother's distinctive laugh, the one she used when she was gossiping, floated through the wood. She wasn't alone. I pushed open the door to find a scene that still makes my blood boil. My mother and her friend Arabella were in my bedroom drawers, pulled open, my personal items spread across the bed like evidence in a crime scene. Arabella was holding my journal, the leather-bound one Cedric had given me for my birthday, reading aloud, while my mother sorted through papers from my nightstand. "What the hell are you doing?" The words escaped before I could censor them, something I'd been trained never to do. Good daughters didn't curse at their mothers. Good daughters didn't raise their voices. But I was done being a good daughter. They both looked up with the casual indifference of people who believed they had every right to be there. My mother didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Oh, Anya, you're home early. Arabella and I were just tidying up. Your room was such a mess." The gaslighting was immediate and practiced. "Chic, that's my private journal," I said, my voice shaking as I pointed at the book in Arabella's hands. "You have no right to read that." Arabella, a woman who had known me since childhood but had always taken my mother's side in everything, shrugged. "Your mother was concerned about you. She has every right to know what's going on in your life. You've been so secretive lately." That's when I noticed what else they'd found. My birth control pills were sitting on the dresser, removed from the drawer where I kept them. Bank statements were fanned out like playing cards. Even my laptop was open, showing my personal email. The violation was complete and systematic. "You need to leave, now!" I tried to keep my voice steady, but rage was building like a volcano. "And give me back my key." My mother stood slowly, her face shifting into the expression she used when she was about to deliver a crushing blow. "Ungrateful. That's what you are. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. I'm trying to save you from ruining your life with that man, and you act like I'm some kind of criminal. You broke into my home." The words exploded out of me. "You're going through my private things. You're literally committing a crime right now." "I have a key," she said smugly. "That means I have permission, And what I've found here is deeply concerning. Birth control. You're not even married. These bank statements show you're wasting money on trips with that man instead of saving for your future. And this journal, the things you've written about me are hateful and untrue. Arabella chimed in with her practiced sympathy voice. Your mother only wants what's best for you, dear. You're clearly going through something. Maybe it's that man influencing you, filling your head with modern ideas about privacy and independence. In my day, daughters respected their mothers. The revelation that came next felt like a physical blow. My mother, perhaps emboldened by her friend's support, decided to lay all her cards on the table. I've been coming here 3 or 4 times a week, you know. Someone needs to keep an eye on you. You've been spiraling ever since you met him. 3 or 4 times a week. I felt nauseous. What else have you done? The list she rattled off so casually made me wonder if I was losing my mind. She'd been reading all my documents, photographing my financial records, for safekeeping. Going through my computer because she'd found my password. But the worst confession was yet to come. I called your boss last week, she said, as if mentioning stopping by the grocery store. I told him I was concerned about your mental state. Someone needed to know that you haven't been yourself lately. The room spun. She'd called my boss. My new position, my professional reputation, everything I'd worked for was now tainted by my mother's interference. You did what? Don't be so dramatic. She waved her hand dismissively. I just expressed some concerns as a loving mother. He was very understanding. He said he'd keep an eye on you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. Instead, I pulled out my phone. You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police. My mother laughed, that cruel sound I'd heard so many times before. The police? For your own mother, they'll laugh at you. I have a key. I gave you life. This is my right as your mother. Rights. I was shaking now. You think being my mother gives you the right to violate my privacy, to sabotage my career, to go through my personal things like I'm a criminal suspect? Arabella had pulled out her phone and was filming, probably to show their church friends later as evidence of my breakdown. Let her film, I thought. Let her document my mother's admission of entering my home without permission multiple times. I'm your mother. Dorothy screamed, her mask finally slipping completely. Everything you have is because of me. This apartment, your job. That man, it's all mine to oversee. You don't get to lock me out of your life. Get out, I said quietly, my voice dangerous in its calmness. Get out now, or I call 911. She threw my spare key at me, the metal hitting my chest before clattering to the floor. This isn't over, she hissed. You'll come crawling back when he leaves you, when you realize what you've thrown away. But I won't be there. You're choosing him over family. They left in a whirlwind of muttered insults and self-righteous indignation, but not before Arabella made sure to knock over a picture frame on her way out, the photo of my college graduation smashing on the hardwood floor. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I sank to the floor among the scattered remnants of my privacy, holding the spare key that had started it all. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called Cedric, barely able to get the words out through my tears. He left work immediately, and within an hour we were at the hardware store buying new locks. That night, as he helped me install them, he held me while I sobbed, grieving not for the mother I had, but for the mother I'd never have. The new locks should have been the end of it. In a normal family, being caught red-handed violating someone's privacy would lead to apologies, maybe some awkward holidays, and, eventually, reconciliation. But Dorothy wasn't normal, and she wasn't done. If anything, changing the locks was a declaration of war in her mind, and she was ready to deploy every weapon in her arsenal. The first shot came at exactly 8:43 the next morning. I was in a meeting with my team presenting quarterly projections when our receptionist knocked on the conference room door. Her face told me something was very wrong. Anya, there's a situation in the lobby. Your mother is here and she's upset. I excused myself, my face burning as my colleagues exchanged glances. The walk to the lobby felt like a march to execution. I could hear her before I saw her, that shrill voice echoing off the marble walls. I demand to see my daughter. You can't keep a mother from her child, I know my rights. Dorothy stood at the security desk dressed in her Sunday best as if she'd planned this performance, which, knowing her, she probably had. Two security guards flanked her, looking uncomfortable as she waved her arms dramatically. There she is, Anya, tell these people who I am. Mom, you need to leave, I said quietly, hyper-aware of the small crowd of employees gathering to watch the show. This is my workplace. Your workplace. She laughed bitterly. This is where they're poisoning your mind against your family. I need to speak to your supervisor immediately. Someone needs to know what's happening to you. The head of security, a kind man named Jerome who'd always greeted me warmly, stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave. You're creating a disturbance. That's when Dorothy really ramped up her performance. She collapsed into a chair, fanning herself dramatically. My own daughter is having me thrown out after everything I've sacrificed. She's been brainwashed by a man, you see. She's not in her right mind. Someone needs to do a wellness check. I wanted to disappear into the floor. My professional reputation, carefully built over years, was crumbling in real time. Mom, please, just go home. We can talk later. Talk. You changed your locks. You've blocked my number. What kind of daughter blocks her own mother? She was playing to the crowd now, and some people were starting to look sympathetic. The devoted mother just trying to help her troubled daughter. It was a role she'd perfected over decades. Jerome finally had to escort her out, but not before she'd made sure everyone in a 3-floor radius knew that I was an ungrateful daughter who was breaking her poor mother's heart. I returned to my meeting to find my boss Harold looking concerned. The presentation continued, but I could feel the shift in the room. I was no longer just Anya, the marketing director. I was Anya with the crazy mother, Anya with family drama, Anya who might not be stable. That afternoon, Harold called me into his office. He closed the door, a bad sign, and gestured for me to sit. Anya, is everything okay at home? The question was gentle, but I could hear the professional concern underneath. I'm fine, I lied. I'm sorry about this morning. It won't happen again. Your mother called me last week, he said slowly, watching my face. She expressed some concerns about your mental health, said you'd been acting erratically. Now this morning, I have to ask, do you need some time off? The company has resources counseling services. I felt like I'd been punched. My mother's poison was spreading through my professional life like cancer. I'm not having mental health issues, I said firmly. I'm dealing with a family member who doesn't respect boundaries. I'm handling it. Harold nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The damage was done. Every mistake I made from now on would be viewed through the lens of mental health concerns. Every bad day would be scrutinized. Dorothy had successfully planted seeds of doubt about my stability in my workplace. That evening, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. My mother had been busy. Her post, shared to multiple family groups and set to public, was a masterpiece of manipulation. Please pray for my daughter Anya. She's going through a difficult time and has cut me out of her life. I'm heartbroken but trusting God to bring her back to her family. The devil works through weak minds, but a mother's love never gives up. The comments were already pouring in. Aunt Martha led the charge. Dorothy, you're such a devoted mother. Anya should be ashamed. She has no idea how lucky she is. Cousin Linda added her expertise. This sounds like that man she's dating. You know how they isolate women from their families. Classic abuser behavior. My phone started ringing. Unknown numbers at first, then family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Each call followed the same script: disappointment in my behavior, reminders of everything my mother had done for me, warnings about regret when she was gone. Uncle Frank was particularly harsh. Your mother wiped your ass and now you think you're too good for her, shame on you. The only voice of reason came from my father's sister, Aunt Grace, who lived across the country. Anya, honey, don't listen to them. I know how Dorothy can be. Stay strong. But one supportive voice was drowned out by the chorus of condemnation. Then things got truly invasive. My ex-boyfriend, someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, your mom reached out. She says you're struggling. I'm here if you need to talk." When I didn't respond, he followed up. "She's really worried about you. Maybe you should hear her out." I called him immediately. "What exactly did she tell you?" He sounded uncomfortable. "She said you were having some kind of breakdown, that some guy was controlling you. She asked if I'd noticed any signs of mental illness when we were together. I told her I couldn't help her, but are you okay?" The humiliation was complete. She was contacting my ex-boyfriends, mining my past for ammunition. Who else had she called? How many people from my past was she trying to recruit for her campaign? The answer came that weekend when Cedric's parents called him. They lived in Boston and had met me only twice, but somehow Dorothy had found their number. She was very concerned, his mother told us over speakerphone. "She said you were isolating our son from his family too, that you had mental health issues you were hiding from him. We didn't believe her, of course, but we wanted you to know." Cedric was furious. "She's trying to sabotage our relationship. This is insane." He wanted to confront her, but I knew that would only feed her narrative of him as the controlling boyfriend who'd turned me against my family. The last straw came when we returned from dinner that Sunday to find Cedric's car vandalized. His tires hadn't just been slashed, they'd been carved with precision. A note under the windshield wiper, written in my mother's distinctive handwriting, read, "He's poisoning your mind. I'm trying to save you from yourself. Come home before it's too late." We called the police, but without proof it was her, they could only take a report. The officer, a young woman who looked tired, gave me a sympathetic look. "Family disputes are tough. Maybe try mediation." That night, as we waited for the tow truck, I made a decision. My mother had declared war, and I was done being a pacifist. It was time to fight back with the one weapon she didn't expect: the legal system. I was going to get a restraining order against my own mother, and I was going to press charges for the break-in. The devoted mother narrative was about to meet cold, hard legal reality. Friday night started like any other. Cedric and I had tickets to see a movie we'd been looking forward to for weeks, a small attempt at normalcy in the chaos my mother had created. I'd been jumpy all week, constantly looking over my shoulder, checking my rearview mirror for familiar cars. The doorbell camera had become my obsession, every notification making my heart race. But for 2 hours in that dark theater, I could pretend everything was normal. We were halfway through the movie when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. The notification from my doorbell camera made my blood run cold. "Motion detected at your front door." I opened the app with shaking hands, and there she was. Dorothy, dressed in black like a burglar in a comedy sketch, trying her old key in my new locks. "We have to go," I whispered to Cedric, showing him the screen. We rushed out of the theater, him driving while I watched the live stream in horror. When the old key didn't work, my mother didn't leave like a normal person would. Instead, she looked around, checking for witnesses, then pulled something from her purse. Lockpicks. "She's actually picking your lock," Cedric said in disbelief when I showed him. "Your mother knows how to pick locks." I watched Arabella appear in frame, positioning herself as lookout, while my mother worked on the deadbolt with practiced efficiency. Where had she learned to do this? How long had she been planning this? The questions swirled as I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? Someone is breaking into my apartment. I can see them on my doorbell camera. They're picking the locks right now. I gave the dispatcher my address, my voice surprisingly steady despite the panic clawing at my throat. "Are you in the residence now, ma'am?" "No, but I'm on my way. I'm about 10 minutes out." "Oi, officers are being dispatched. Do not approach the residence until police arrive. Can you describe the intruders?" I hesitated for a moment, then made the choice that would change everything. "It's my mother and her friend. My mother, who I've recently banned from my apartment. She's literally picking my locks as we speak." The dispatcher's tone shifted slightly, probably thinking this was just another family dispute. But when I explained about the recent incidents and that I had video evidence of forced entry in progress, she assured me officers were on the way. Cedric broke every speed limit getting us home, pulling into the complex just as two police cruisers arrived. I showed the officers the live feed on my phone. Dorothy and Arabella had successfully entered my apartment 5 minutes ago. "That's breaking and entering," the older officer said. "Family or not." We followed the officers up the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The door to my apartment was closed, but unlocked. The officers knocked, announcing themselves. The sounds from inside, scrambling and muffled voices, told us everything we needed to know. When my mother opened the door, her face cycled through emotions like a broken slot machine. Surprise, fear, then settling on indignation. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I was just checking on my daughter. I've been so worried." "Ma'am, step aside," the officer said firmly. They entered to find a scene that still makes me shake with rage. Boxes were scattered around my living room, labeled in my mother's neat handwriting: evidence of sin, inappropriate items, financial records, and most disturbingly, mental health concerns. Arabella stood frozen by my bookshelf, holding an armful of my personal journals. My bedroom door was open, revealing more chaos inside. They'd been systematically packing up my life, preparing to steal it under the guise of saving me. "What are you doing?" I demanded, though the answer was obvious. My mother straightened her shoulders, slipping into her righteous mother persona. "I'm doing what any good mother would do. I'm saving you from yourself. These officers will understand. I'm preventing my daughter from making terrible life choices." By breaking into her home, the younger officer was examining the door. "Ma'am, how did you gain entry?" "I have a key," Dorothy proclaimed triumphantly. "The locks were changed earlier this week," I interjected. "She picked them. I have it all on video." The officers examined my phone, watching the footage of my mother expertly working the lock picks while Arabella kept watch. The older officer whistled low. "That's definitely breaking and entering. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put your hands behind your back." The explosion was instant. "You're arresting me. I'm her mother. I gave birth to her. I have every right to be here. This is insane. She's the one who needs help." As the officer cuffed her, Dorothy's performance reached Oscar-worthy heights. "Anya, how could you do this to your own mother? I'm trying to save you. That man has brainwashed you. Officers, you don't understand. She's mentally ill. Check those boxes, I have evidence." Arabella tried to edge toward the door but was stopped by the second officer. "I was just helping," she stammered. "Dorothy said Anya gave permission. She said we were getting things for her." "Did I give you permission to break into my home?" I asked her directly. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Dorothy said..." "She said you weren't thinking clearly, that we needed to intervene." Both women were arrested, and the screaming continued all the way to the patrol cars. Dorothy's voice echoed through the complex. "I'm her mother. You can't arrest a mother for loving her child. Anya, you'll regret this when he leaves you. Don't come crawling back." Neighbors had emerged from their apartments, phones out recording everything. By morning, I knew this would be all over social media. The marketing director whose mother was arrested at her apartment. The family drama that required police intervention. My private life turned into public entertainment. After they were gone, Cedric and I surveyed the damage. They'd been thorough in their invasion. Every drawer had been opened, every private document examined. My laptop was open on the kitchen counter, showing attempts to access my email. Financial documents were photographed and scattered. Most disturbing were the notebooks where my mother had been cataloging her evidence against me, records of when I didn't answer her calls, screenshots of my social media posts, even receipts from restaurants where I'd eaten with Cedric. "This is stalking," Cedric said, flipping through one of the notebooks. "She's been documenting your life for months. Look, she even has your work schedule notes about your colleagues, theories about who's influencing you." I found the box labeled evidence of sin and laughed bitterly at the contents: birth control pills. A few romance novels receipts from trips with Cedric, even a bottle of wine from my rack. In her mind, these normal adult items were proof of my moral decay. The police took photos of everything building their case. The officer who'd arrested my mother pulled me aside before leaving. "You'll want to get a restraining order immediately. This level of intensity, it usually escalates. And please consider changing your locks again, maybe upgrading to a security system. People who pick locks once will do it again." That night, Cedric held me as I cried, not from sadness, but from pure exhaustion. The woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally had tried to steal my life, pack it up in boxes labeled with her judgment. She'd recruited others to help her turn my private life into a rescue mission that existed only in her twisted mind. And now she was in jail, probably still screaming about her rights as a mother. I knew this wasn't over. The arrest would only fuel her narrative of persecution, give her more ammunition for her campaign against me. But for the first time, I had the law on my side. The devoted mother mask had slipped, and underneath was someone willing to commit crimes to maintain control. The evidence was overwhelming, captured in high definition. Whatever came next, I was ready to fight. My mother made bail the next morning, and the harassment began immediately. My phone, which I'd finally unblocked out of concern for emergency contact, exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls between 2 and 5 a.m. The voicemails alternated between sobbing declarations of love and venomous threats. A greatest hits album of maternal manipulation. "Anya, sweetheart, mommy loves you. Please don't do this." Click. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done." Click. "The police hurt my wrists. Are you happy now?" Click. "When I die, this will be on your conscience." Click. "That man is going to leave you and you'll have no one." Click. The text messages were worse rapid-fire streams of consciousness that showed her deteriorating mental state. Photos of me as a baby with captions like, "Remember when you loved me," followed immediately by screenshots of Bible verses about honoring thy mother. Then legal threats, promises to sue me for emotional distress, false imprisonment, defamation. She claimed she'd hired the best lawyer in Denver, that I'd be bankrupt by the time she was done with me. Monday morning, I sat in the office of Janet Woodward, the attorney Cedric's family had recommended. She specialized in family law and restraining orders, and her office walls were covered with thank you notes from clients she'd helped escape abusive situations. She listened to my story without judgment, occasionally nodding and taking notes. "First things first," Janet said, sliding forms across her desk. "We're filing for an emergency protective order today. The criminal case will proceed separately, but we need immediate protection in place. The escalation pattern you're describing, particularly the lock-picking and staging of an intervention, shows someone who won't stop without legal intervention." As I filled out the paperwork detailing years of boundary violations culminating in the break-in, Janet prepared me for what was coming. "Your mother will likely contest this. She'll paint herself as a concerned parent, you as an unstable child under someone's influence. Be prepared for character assassination. Document everything. Every text, every call, every incident. We'll need it all." She wasn't wrong. By Wednesday, my mother had indeed hired a lawyer, Richard Pemberton, known for taking messy family cases and turning them into circuses. His first move was to file a counter-petition claiming I was mentally incompetent and needed a conservatorship. According to his filing, my mother was trying to protect me from self-destructive behaviors induced by a manipulative romantic partner. The evidence she'd assembled was a twisted masterpiece. Therapy notes from when I was 16, taken out of context to suggest ongoing mental illness. Normal young adult behavior spun as warning signs: staying out late, partying dangerously, traveling with Cedric, being isolated from family, changing my locks, paranoid behavior. She'd even gotten statements from family members supporting her claims. Aunt Martha's affidavit was particularly painful to read. "Anya has always been troubled. Dorothy has done everything possible to help her, but she refuses to accept guidance. This boyfriend has made things worse. I believe Dorothy's actions come from a place of desperate maternal love. The smear campaign intensified on social media. Arabella, out on her own bail, became my mother's chief propagandist. She posted videos of my mother crying, looking frail and victimized. "This is what happens when children abandon their parents," the captions read. "Pray for reconciliation." The comments sections became battlegrounds between people who saw through the manipulation and those who bought the grieving mother act. Then came the stalking. Despite being explicitly told by her lawyer to cease contact, my mother couldn't help herself. She appeared at my gym at 6 a.m., standing by my car with red-rimmed eyes. When I tried to enter the building without acknowledging her, she followed, wailing about forgiveness and family. "Please, Anya, just talk to me. I'm your mother. I'm dying inside. How can you do this to the woman who gave you life?" The gym staff had to intervene, escorting her out, while she screamed about her rights. I filed a police report, adding it to the growing pile of documentation. 2 days later, she was at my grocery store, pushing her cart behind mine stage, whispering to other shoppers about her troubled daughter who won't speak to her own mother. The incident that finally showed her true colors happened at Cedric's apartment. We'd been staying there more often, thinking she didn't know the address. We were wrong. Thursday evening, we returned from dinner to find his tires slashed again, but this time there was more. The word thief was keyed into his driver's side door. A brick had been thrown through his living room window with a note attached. "You stole my daughter. Give her back, or this gets worse." The security footage from Cedric's building was clear. My mother, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like a discount spy, committing vandalism with shocking violence. The way she attacked those tires, the force behind the brick throw, it revealed a rage that had always simmered beneath her controlled exterior. This wasn't a concerned mother. This was someone capable of real violence. "We could have been inside?" Cedric said quietly, staring at the broken glass. "What if that brick had hit one of us?" That's when I realized my mother wasn't just controlling or manipulative. She was dangerous. The woman who'd raised me, who'd made my Halloween costumes and driven me to school, was capable of physical harm if it meant maintaining control. The restraining order wasn't just about setting boundaries anymore. It was about survival. Janet fast-tracked our court date, submitting the vandalism footage as evidence of immediate danger. My mother's lawyer tried to claim it was a setup, that we'd staged the incident to frame her. But the security footage was time-stamped, and my mother had made the mistake of using her credit card at a hardware store to buy the brick. The receipt found in her car during a search related to the criminal charges sealed her fate. The family pressure reached a crescendo. My phone rang constantly with relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all singing the same song. "She's your mother. You'll regret this. Family is everything." Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, left a voicemail that chilled me. "You think you're so high and mighty with your fancy job and college degree. Your mother made you everything you are. When she dies, her blood will be on your hands." But something unexpected happened too. Aunt Grace flew in from Seattle, showing up at my apartment with a suitcase and a determined expression. "I'm here to testify," she said simply. "I've watched Dorothy manipulate and control you your entire life. I should have spoken up sooner." She brought photos, letters, documentation of her own. Times when my mother had gone too far, incidents I'd forgotten or normalized. The Christmas when I was 12 and she'd thrown away all my presents because I'd gotten a B in math. The time she'd called my high school boyfriend's parents to break us up. The pattern of control stretching back decades, witnessed and documented by someone who'd been too polite to intervene until now. "Your mother is sick, Anya," Grace told me gently. Not in a way that excuses her behavior, but in a way that means she'll never stop unless forced. "This isn't about you. This is about her need for control. You could be perfect, and it wouldn't be enough." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Cedric's arms, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. Tomorrow I'd face my mother in court asking a judge to legally bar her from my life. The little girl in me who still wanted her mother's approval was screaming, but the adult who'd been terrorized into anxiety medication was ready for war. "Whatever happens," Cedric whispered in the dark, "I'm here. We'll get through this together." I squeezed his hand, grateful for the one person who'd seen through my mother's act from the beginning. Tomorrow would either be the beginning of my freedom or the escalation of a war I never wanted to fight. Either way, I was done being Dorothy's victim. It was time to fight for the life she was trying to steal. The courthouse steps seemed impossibly steep that morning. Each one required conscious effort, my legs feeling like lead as I climbed toward the confrontation I'd spent my whole life avoiding. Cedric held my hand while Janet carried our boxes of evidence. Aunt Grace walked beside us, her presence a shield against the family members we could already see gathering like storm clouds. The courtroom was packed. My mother had mobilized her entire network, filling the benches with church friends, distant relatives, and anyone she could convince that her daughter was breaking her heart. I recognized faces from my childhood, people who'd watched me grow up now here to witness what they saw as my ultimate betrayal. Dorothy sat at the defendant's table looking deliberately frail. She'd chosen her costume carefully, a modest gray dress, minimal makeup, tissues clutched in trembling hands. The grieving mother destroyed by her ungrateful child. Her lawyer, Pemberton, looked like he'd stepped out of a law firm commercial, all silver hair and expensive suit. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Catherine Chen," the bailiff announced. Judge Chen, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, took her seat and immediately set the tone. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings. This is a hearing for a protective order, not a custody battle or competency hearing. We'll stick to the relevant facts." Pemberton immediately objected. "Your Honor, the defendant's mental state is absolutely relevant to these proceedings." Overruled. "Ms. Woodward, call your first witness." The next 3 hours were a methodical destruction of my mother's carefully crafted image. Janet started with the doorbell footage, playing the video of my mother picking my locks on the courtroom's large screen. The room watched in silence as Dorothy worked those picks with practiced ease while Arabella kept watch. There was no explaining away the premeditation, the criminal intent. "Can you identify the individuals in this video?" Janet asked me when I took the stand. "That's my mother Dorothy picking my locks, and her friend Arabella Costa acting as lookout." "Had you given them permission to enter your apartment?" "No, I'd explicitly banned them and changed the locks." We went through the evidence systematically. The photos of ransacked drawers, the boxes labeled with my supposed sins, the notebooks documenting my every move. Janet played voicemails that made me cringe, my mother's voice filling the courtroom with threats and manipulation. The text messages scrolled past on screen, hundreds of them, showing the escalation from concern to harassment to outright threats. When Janet showed the security footage of my mother vandalizing Cedric's car, several people in the gallery gasped. This wasn't the devoted mother they knew. This was someone consumed by rage, violently attacking property, throwing bricks through windows. The woman wielding that knife on the tires looked capable of anything. "Has this pattern of behavior affected your work?" Janet asked. I described the scene at my office, the meeting with HR, the professional damage. "My mother called my boss claiming I was mentally unstable. She's trying to destroy every part of my life she can't control." Pemberton's cross-examination was exactly what Janet had prepared me for. He tried to paint me as unstable, ungrateful under Cedric's influence. But I stayed calm, sticking to facts, letting the evidence speak for itself. When he suggested I was overreacting to a mother's natural concern, I simply pointed to the broken window photo. Natural concern doesn't require a brick. Then came the character witnesses. My mother had assembled quite a parade. Arabella took the stand first, now claiming she'd been trying to help Dorothy save Anya from a dangerous situation. She described me as aggressive and unstable. During the apartment incident, conveniently forgetting to mention the lockpicking until Janet reminded her she was under oath. "You were filmed acting as a lookout while Ms. Dorothy picked the locks. Were you aware that was illegal? Arabella squirmed. Dorothy said she had permission. She said Anya was just confused. 3 church friends testified about what a wonderful mother Dorothy had always been. How she'd sacrificed everything for me, how she'd shared her concerns about my sudden personality change since meeting Cedric. But Janet was ready with questions that revealed they had no actual knowledge of our relationship, just my mother's version of events. When it was the defense's turn, Dorothy took the stand and her performance was masterful. The tears came immediately as she described raising me alone after my father left, conveniently omitting that she'd driven him away with similar behavior. She painted herself as a devoted mother just trying to protect her daughter from a man who was clearly isolating me. She changed after meeting him, Dorothy said, dabbing at her eyes. My sweet girl became cold distant. She stopped coming to family gatherings. She blocked my number. What mother wouldn't be concerned? So, you decided to break into her apartment? Janet asked on cross. I had a key, Dorothy insisted, which didn't work because she'd changed the locks. So you picked them. Where did you learn to pick locks, Ms. Dorothy? My mother's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of anger before the tears returned. I looked it up online. I was desperate to check on my daughter. Desperate enough to slash tires, throw bricks through windows. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but the security footage had already been shown. Her denial fell flat. The moment that changed everything came when Pemberton made a tactical error. Trying to show my mother's desperation came from love, he asked her, "What would you do to save your daughter?" Dorothy's response revealed everything. Anything she belongs to me. I gave her life. I shaped her. She's mine. That man stole her. But I'll get her back. A mother's love doesn't give up. I'll never stop fighting for what's mine. The courtroom went silent. Even Pemberton looked uncomfortable. Judge Chen leaned forward. Ms. Dorothy, are you saying your daughter belongs to you? My mother, perhaps realizing her mistake, tried to backtrack. I just mean, she's my daughter, my only child. I have rights. No, Judge Chen said firmly. You don't. Your daughter is an adult with the right to live her life free from harassment, stalking, and criminal behavior, regardless of your biological relationship. Aunt Grace's testimony was devastating to my mother's case. She brought receipts literally and figuratively. Photos of old incidents, letters my mother had written threatening various people who'd gotten too close to me over the years. Documentation of a pattern spanning decades. She spoke clearly and calmly about watching my mother's controlling behavior escalate whenever I showed independence. I should have spoken up sooner, Grace said, looking at me with tears in her eyes. I watched Dorothy systematically destroy Anya's self-esteem while calling it love. What she's doing now is just the extinction burst of a narcissist losing control. My mother couldn't contain herself. She jumped up screaming, "You were always jealous of me. Jealous that I had a daughter and you didn't. You're lying." Judge Chen gavelled for order. Ms. Dorothy, control yourself or I'll have you removed. But the damage was done. The mask had fallen completely. The devoted mother persona was gone, replaced by someone wild-eyed and desperate, screaming about ownership and rights, looking nothing like the victim she'd tried to portray. The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive. I'm granting the protective order for the maximum duration allowed by law. Ms. Dorothy, you are to stay at least 500 feet away from the petitioner at all times. No contact, direct or indirect. This includes through third parties. You are not to come to her home, workplace, or any location you know her to be. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. My mother's scream echoed through the courtroom. You can't do this. She's my daughter. My daughter. As court officers moved to contain her, she turned to me, her face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. When you're alone and he's left, you don't come crawling back. You're dead to me, dead. They had to physically remove her. Her screams echoing down the courthouse halls. The family members who'd come to support her sat in stunned silence, perhaps seeing for the first time the woman I'd always known existed beneath the surface. Outside the courthouse, I stood in the sunshine, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years free. The protective order was just paper, but it represented something more. For the first time in my life, I'd stood up to my mother and won. I'd chosen myself over her narrative, my safety over her approval. There would be criminal trials ahead, consequences for the break-in and vandalism. Some family relationships were probably destroyed forever. But as Cedric wrapped his arms around me and Aunt Grace squeezed my hand, I realized I'd gained something precious: the right to live my own life without fear, without constantly looking over my shoulder, without the weight of my mother's expectations crushing my spirit. The spare key that had started this nightmare was still in my pocket. I pulled it out, looked at it one last time, then handed it to Aunt Grace. "Want to come over for dinner Sunday? I think it's time I gave this to someone who actually respects boundaries." She smiled through her tears. "I'd be honored." The immediate aftermath of the restraining order felt like emerging from a bomb shelter after years underground. Every small freedom felt monumental. I could check my mail without fear of finding it pre-sorted. I could come home from work knowing my apartment would be exactly as I'd left it. My phone was blissfully quiet, no longer a source of anxiety that made my stomach churn with each notification. But trauma doesn't disappear with a court order. For weeks, I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder in parking lots, my heart racing at the sight of any woman who resembled my mother. I'd wake in cold sweats from nightmares where she was standing over my bed, that spare key glinting in her hand. The hypervigilance was exhausting my body, still prepared for battles that were legally supposed to be over. Cedric suggested therapy, and I finally agreed. Dr. Miranda Chen specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse. Our first session, I sat on her couch clutching a throw pillow like a life preserver, words tumbling out in a flood I couldn't stop. "She's my mother," I kept saying. "How did it come to this? What kind of daughter gets a restraining order against her own mother?" Dr. Chen's response changed my life. "The kind of daughter whose mother made it necessary. You didn't choose this, Anya. You're not responsible for her behavior, only for protecting yourself from it." Therapy became my weekly lifeline. We unpacked decades of manipulation, the gaslighting that made me question my own reality, the guilt that had been weaponized against me since childhood. I learned terms like enmeshment and emotional incest, finally having language for experiences I'd never been able to articulate. The family fallout was swift and brutal. My phone number was passed around like a party favor, relatives I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly compelled to share their opinions. Most chose my mother's side, unable to reconcile the devoted mother image with the reality of who she truly was. I lost cousins I'd grown up with, aunts who'd been at every birthday, an entire extended family ecosystem that required my submission to function. But surprising support emerged, too. Aunt Grace became a regular presence in my life, sharing her own stories of surviving my mother's manipulation. "I was the lucky one," she told me over coffee one Sunday. "I could go home to Seattle. You were trapped with her." My father, absent since I was 7, reached out through Facebook. His message was simple. "I heard what happened. I'm sorry I left you alone with her. I was a coward. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." It took me a month to respond, but eventually we had a video call. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes held understanding. He'd escaped Dorothy too, but the guilt of leaving me behind had haunted him for 25 years. The criminal trials proceeded slowly. My mother pled not guilty to all charges, maintaining her narrative of maternal concern. But the evidence was overwhelming. She was convicted of breaking and entering, criminal mischief, and harassment. The judge sentenced her to 2 years probation and mandatory counseling, which she loudly protested was persecution of a loving mother. Arabella got community service and seemed genuinely shaken by the experience. She sent one letter of apology, which my lawyer advised me not to respond to, but her words suggested she'd finally seen through my mother's manipulation. "I thought I was helping," she wrote. "I see now how wrong I was. 6 months into my new life, changes both small and large transformed my daily existence. I redecorated my apartment, replacing items my mother had chosen or influenced with pieces that reflected my actual taste. Out went the beige, appropriate curtains, in came vibrant blues and greens. The inspirational plaques with passive-aggressive messages disguised as love were replaced with artwork I actually enjoyed. Work improved dramatically once the specter of my mother's interference lifted. Without the constant anxiety, my creativity flourished. I led a campaign that increased our clients' market share by 12%, earning recognition that felt untainted by worry about my mother's potential sabotage. Harold apologized for doubting me, admitting he'd been fooled by her concerned mother act. Cedric proposed on a quiet Sunday morning, making pancakes in my kitchen, when he suddenly dropped to one knee, spatula still in hand. "I've watched you fight for your freedom," he said, "and I want to spend my life making sure you never have to fight alone again." The ring was perfect, chosen without any input from my mother about what was appropriate or respectable. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and the family members who'd supported me. The guest list was shorter than most, but every person there had chosen me over the comfortable lie of keeping the peace. My mother tried to violate the restraining order, only once showing up at my workplace on what would have been her wedding anniversary. Security intercepted her in the parking garage, and she was arrested before she could enter the building. She spent a week in jail, her probation extended. The police officer who called to inform me sounded tired. "Ma'am, she was carrying a photo album and insisting she just wanted to show you baby pictures. We've seen this kind of escalation before. Please be extra careful." But I refused to live in fear. Dr. Chen helped me develop safety plans that didn't require constant vigilance. I moved to a high-security building with Cedric, one that required key fobs for every floor. We got married in Aunt Grace's backyard in Seattle, surrounded by friends who'd become my chosen family. My father walked me down the aisle, both of us crying for the years we'd lost and the future we were building. The toast at our reception came from Mira, my maid of honor and colleague, who'd witnessed the office incident, to Anya, who taught us all that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no to someone who insists they love you. 2 years after that terrible Tuesday when I found my mother rifling through my life, I received word that she'd been hospitalized after a mental breakdown. She'd been found at my old apartment building trying to convince new tenants to let her in, insisting her daughter lived there. Part of me felt the old pull, the guilt trying to drag me back. But I'd learned the difference between compassion and self-destruction. I sent a card through my lawyer. "I hope you get the help you need." Nothing more. Nothing less. The boundary held firm even in the face of her crisis. Her siblings took over her care, finally seeing what Aunt Grace had tried to tell them for years. My cousin Linda called to apologize, admitting they'd enabled her behavior by always taking her side. "We thought we were supporting family," she said. "We didn't realize we were helping her hurt you." Today I'm 35, married to a man who understands that love means respect, not possession. We're expecting our first child, a daughter who will grow up knowing that boundaries are healthy, that love doesn't require sacrificing yourself, that no is a complete sentence even when said to family. Sometimes I dream about my mother, but they're not nightmares anymore. In these dreams, she's the mother I needed her to be, proud of my accomplishments without needing to own them, loving without consuming. I wake feeling sad for what never was, but no longer guilty for protecting what is. The spare key to my home now belongs to Aunt Grace, who uses it only when watering plants during our vacations. She sends photos of herself with our cat, always with the message, "Everything's perfect. Enjoy your trip." It's such a small thing, respect for privacy, but it means everything. My story isn't unique. Thousands of adults struggle with parents who can't see them as separate people, who view love as ownership, who would rather destroy their children than lose control. To anyone reading this who recognizes their own pain in my words, know this: you deserve love that doesn't hurt. You deserve respect that doesn't require submission. You deserve a life that's truly your own. The journey from victim to survivor isn't linear. There are setbacks, moments of doubt, grief for the family you needed but didn't get. But on the other side of that journey is freedom. The spare key that once symbolized my mother's invasion now represents trust given wisely. And for the first time in my entire life, I hold all the keys to my own doors, my own choices, my own future. That Tuesday afternoon when I came home to find my life invaded feels like a lifetime ago. The woman who tolerated that violation, who apologized for having boundaries, who believed she owed access to anyone who claimed to love her, she's gone, replaced by someone who understands that real love doesn't pick locks or throw bricks. Real love respects closed doors and celebrates the independence of the people it claims to cherish. So to those who insist that family is everything, that mothers always know best, that biological bonds supersede personal safety, I say this family isn't a license to harm. Love isn't an excuse for control. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is to lock the door, change the key, and choose yourself. My name is Anya. I'm 35 years old and I'm finally free. Before we wrap up this wild journey, I want to know, have you ever had to set tough boundaries with family members who couldn't respect your independence? What was your breaking point? Share your stories in the comments below, because sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding freedom and setting boundaries. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect yourself even from family. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships that honor your autonomy. Until next time, stay strong and keep those boundaries firm.